When it comes to Disney, the main heart of it relies on its heroes. Sure, the villain plays an important part too, and are my favorite aspects of the movies, but it's really the hero that makes the story so important. And because of that reason, I thought it was finally time I make a ranking on all the Disney heroes from all the Disney animated films. The main ones, at least, of course, that aren't scattered like the package films. Just the ones that forward the story from beginning to end that we all grew up loving for the better or the worse in the case when ranking them. And I also wanted to make this list because I feel disrespected by Disney's definition of Disney princesses, where some characters featured in the group are not actually princesses at all. Stop trying to say they are when they're actually not. So yes, to make our lives easier, this is strictly Disney animated movies talking about our heroes. I'm not going to include Goofy in this because the Goofy movie is not an official Walt Disney Animation production, where that is something I will actually include in my official Disney movie ranking list because that is just too important in my life not to cover. But yeah, strictly speaking, this list will cover the main heroes of each individual full-length feature film, including if they involve a few others like in Strange World or somewhat that I find unique to the story. And I know you'll understand as we go throughout the list of what I actually do that might not be in your own definition. So with that said, let's begin this ranking. I find it hard to believe that Chicken Little is still a Disney film because it's just so bad, and so is Chicken Little himself, and quite frankly every other character in this damn film. And the reason I rank him the lowest is because of how humiliated he gets by everyone, including his own father being Buck Cluck as the worst Disney parent that has ever existed, and it's not even close. It could have meant something if they stick to one story during the production, but they just kept changing everything to a pile of nonsense that we got. He's deemed crazy at the beginning of the film and then works to prove himself by winning the baseball game, which his father really actually doubted he would actually win, and then gets the reputation ruined yet again because no one believes the alien spaceship story he has until they find out the sky is literally falling based on this misunderstanding because these aliens lost their child. Where this is the point I really don't want to talk about this anymore because of how stupid everything is in this film. I just don't find any idea they made in the final product very compelling for his character because it's not important. Any win he gets is dragged down by another detail, where they then celebrate him as some sort of hero with a film even though it was about returning an alien back home because everyone in freaking town is just a major idiot. They don't actually believe anything he says and just already making up because he was right all along. I just don't like it. Like literally, how is this a Disney movie? How in the world is this a Disney movie? Even the ones I hate in the modern era actually feel like Disney movies, where this feels like a stain that shouldn't have been released at all. Maybe a Disney Channel movie instead, or just a direct-to-DVDs film, because that's the quality that this film reaches overall. It's amazing how much I have to say about this movie, more than Chicken Little himself, because it's just so awful. The worst Disney has ever done, and it's not even close. You know, I'm just not a fan on Home on the Range no matter how hard you spin it. One of the reasons why I excluded it from my villain video because no matter how funny it is, I just really don't like this movie at all either. It's just very bland and forgettable, wedged in the transitionary period of Disney to 3D. And because of that, I'm not fond of having a trio of cows as my heroes as well. Not that I hate cows personally, but I just don't like any of them as characters in the film. It's just so weird knowing that the main cow, Maggie, is played by Roseanne Barr now, and how Mrs. Calloway was also played by Judy Dench also. They just walk around through the Old West meeting wacky characters that aren't very interesting at all. Just one of those things I find no interest in now looking back. I really watch the Dark Age Disney movies more often than I do this because of how stupidly unmemorable this is in an underrated era of films, where Chicken Little is at least memorable for how shit it is, and where at least this has the advantage of not being downright dreadful in that right, but just not interesting enough for me to care about because I really fucking hate this film. It's just how I have nothing to say about these damn cows as heroes because they aren't in my opinion, and they don't do anything great in that regard to be the main protagonists or characters. It's something I debated ranking them higher because there are more terrible heroes as this as a whole, but then again I just don't really like this movie at all, serving an entire plate of utter boredom for having nothing to offer to me. I wish I had something more to say to you guys about them, but I really can't, and I'm sorry for that, extending to find reasons for whatever this is. The horse Buck who dreams of being a hero is more of a hero than they are for their very own story, and that's sad. I just wish the villain had a more compelling hero to go up against instead of a freaking cow. For how many of us say the Black Cauldron is very underrated, the same cannot be said for our main hero in Tarzan. I mean, he dreams of being a warrior, but he certainly doesn't act like one. Disappointing since the aesthetic of the movie and its setting was pretty great and had those materials to be special, but just fell short when Tarzan was the main hero. Because in dreaming of becoming the hero he wants to be, he loses what he was supposed to do to keep track of the damn pig, doing the most foolishly stupid things that doesn't warrant him to earn the title of being a hero at all. He doesn't earn anything in his journey, he just keeps messing up at every turn, saved only by a magic sword that doesn't really allow him to develop as a character. An arrogant prick, yes, but not really a main hero. I mean, he didn't even earn that sword at all, not from just taking it or anything we learned previously to get to this point, and was just there to serve as the purpose of him being the fucking protagonist of this story. There's just nothing in his development to offer between him and the Horned King, because the Horned King also gets defeated by the Cauldron instead of himself, where he just stands below him to watch. Not very compelling or interesting when all the others had a more direct impact to defeat the villain in many different ways, and not just getting slowly pulled in like he could have just ran away or remotely do anything actually smart. Just a freaking whiny crybaby at various points that doesn't really have anything to offer to the audience to connect with. A reason why most people don't seek to remember the Black Cauldron at all. Because if you did manage to actually have a hero that earns what he dreams, then the movie could have had bigger potential on its release and its subsequent cult following. Just make the damn live action TV show based on the books and we can actually solve all these problems 100%. Where at this point, I'm just happy he didn't get the recognition he never deserved and never will with the passage of time in the Disney pantheon. And here we are again with another boy I and many others don't like, in actually Child King Arthur himself, or commonly known as Wart in the film. Because Arthur really doesn't do anything, nothing to attain the title of king in the end when he pulls the sword from the stone. He's just dragged along for the journey when Merlin acts as the real protagonist of the story, actually doing things when we know he's not. Like seriously, he does all the work required in the journey that heroes usually go through and not this 11-year-old boy who just watches along. Just like if he were a boy pulled from the theater in the audience to actually be a part of the movie itself, and that's it, just to see the movie around him. And it's not like it's actually clear that he actually wants to join in too, so that's another mark that knocks him down as a hero, because he really doesn't attain anything he wants or needs that most characters usually grow through in this very position. He's just hired in Tarzan because at least he's more tolerable as a hero, other than one stuck-up bitch in his own arrogance that causes him to lose the plot for various moments. And transforming him into other animals really didn't help either, because he really doesn't learn anything in the end after he pulls the sword to become king. He just watched Merlin do all the work and now he just doesn't know what the hell to do as king in the last few minutes of the movie, because he wasn't warranted this arc of becoming king. But okay, I guess, because Merlin's here to teach him like he just did for the entire movie, just leading us to believe that Merlin is the one who should be king because he actually did everything in the entire film. I also just didn't like how they used 3 different voice actors for Arthur too, with 2 of them being the director's sons, because the main dude who actually starred as and entered puberty during the time of production, causing the boy to age up in voice for various scenes, which makes no sense and makes it so awkward to watch for someone who still remains 11 throughout the entire course of the film, or that any of them actually had American accents for the King of England. But besides that, it's just like, don't worry dude, you're going to be a great king, and then the movie ends. And I mean, I'm sorry Walt, but your movie directed by Wolfgang Reitman is a straight up L. Moving on. Raya and the Last Dragon is a very painful movie to sit through, with its brazenly awful trust messages, which sadly affect our main hero in Raya herself, like I said before. It's not like she is remotely bad as a character apart from those dumb quips that are very frustrating to watch, but it's just how the trust message ruins her entire character arc for me. Because the movie puts a lot of the blame on her for not being so trusting, when we resolve that at the very end to see, even though what we saw through painfully villainous characters like Namari should say otherwise from the very beginning. And then you have to focus on the regions full of other side characters, which kinda shortens the amount of time we get to spend to know her at all. The ideas of the film just don't work because you don't actually have the time to show it. Because it does have something to show that had potential featured in its animation and action that showcase Raya's skills, which are pretty great, but character-wise and story-wise for everything else and her specifically really wasn't there for us to see. You set something up that showed us the consequences of trusting Namari, making it her fault to why the world is broken, but then you constantly backstab her to put it on her to trust again to solve that, and that really doesn't make any sense at all. It's how Namaari makes the most stupidest decisions in the entire movie, threatening them with her finger on the trigger of the crossbow pointed at Sisu that causes Raya to act to stop her because of what Sisu is doing to reach out to her. An action for the movie to actually blame her for not trusting Namaari, as said by her, because she indirectly caused Sisu's death that actually came directly from Namaari's own crossbow that she could have done regardless if she was trying to stop her, which is very stupid to see because she never earned that through any mistake she had, where it just straightened Raya's argument about not trusting anyone anymore because what she did specifically to prove this point, really making the ending so unforgivable for the characters, especially Raya's entire journey as the hero of this film, who learned nothing but to trust people when they are shown not worthy of that trust at all. You should never be doing these things when she wasn't afforded the opportunity at all during any point in the film, and only ruins Raya's development as a character, even if that wasn't a thing at all. Like, there's no reason this film should have been given this amount of praise it had upon release, because nothing is actually earned in the story for Raya at all, learning absolutely nothing because she did trust at first and came around to the same point at the end of the movie, where it easily forgives the others' actions throughout the film, making it pathetically stupid overall. Raya is a character that had potential but just squandered by every single stupid decision that makes it a pathetic movie overall, and that is a truly disgrace on Disney's part. Shame on you for making this movie the way it did when it actually could have had something nice to say. I was never a fan of Dinosaur, and I'm still not, with nothing about it was compelling at all. It's not hateable to any degree, where I understand why it's actually liked too, but for me it's just something I couldn't get into, and neither could I for the main hero being In Iguanodon. Like, sure, Aladar is a helpful dinosaur, but just for a guy like me and knowing Disney animation as a whole for my taste, I really couldn't connect with what they were doing for any of them at all. Too realistic for my taste to have any gripping meaning overall. Because honestly, you really don't remember Aladar having an overall impact in the Disney pantheon at all, going places with his large body to help these ancient lemurs that you hardly associate with the Disney brand unless you go to the Animal Kingdom at Walt Disney World and ride the ride that is named after the film to promote it. Like, that's literally the only place people really know that this was a Disney movie or a movie at all, and actually nothing else. I appreciate what they did to try to do with him and everything else in the movie, but I really have nothing to say or add to this world, where other films actually have more vibrance and life to them that I personally connect with. Just not this. Still don't hate it and love its ambition, but it just falls flat because of the world around it and its story. Wish I could say more for its character, who is clearly better designed than the previous heroes, but I just really can't. Let's be honest, considering how many times I've talked about her, I think we should put Elsa on this spot on the hero list, because there were just so many ways to actually make her a better character interesting, but ruined because of what they had to rush through everything else. For of course, Elsa was in fact the main villain of the first, but turning that because we wanted to be more sympathetic and using Hans to pathetically fill that gap instead. But besides that, this is going to focus on her as a hero in the second film, and quite frankly, it is worse than the first for her entire development, because Elsa's never really given the time to actually explain her character arc at all, or anything she's destined to be warranted as the fifth spirit, because she constantly pushes others out, like her sister again, that the film does for no good reason, even though the arc we went on in the first. Like, why should she be doing this when we learned that was a bad thing to do in the first, or whatever that was being called to do, like, which wasn't clear at all. How it wasn't shown and poorly explained of what was being called with no clear consequences to the entire story. Just a rushed product and nothing more, when they had all the opportunities to make an actual sequel to make Frozen more compelling, but actually didn't in the end. They just continued to make it hard for us to connect with her doing these things except the song, and kind of ruins the whole entire point of what was being earned for her character. How both had something to show for Elsa, but ended up lazily stitched together, making her turn out for the worse in most people's eyes rather than the better. Nothing through the hero's journey is earned for her because it was not explained very well, and something I really don't want to explain further since I've already explained it many times in the past if you want to check that out. So in short, badly rushed character with little real development as a hero, and that's it. And I wish that was actually solved. Pocahontas is sadly one of those things that remain in deep controversy no matter how hard you look at it, pained with a bland story based off a real historical event. And because of that, her character certainly gets dragged down under those circumstances, despite being the highlight of the film, of course. Because there are clear moments that make her stand out for being great and the basis for other strong female heroes for Disney that would come later on that makes me rank her higher at this point, but still led on by a pathetic story that really isn't great overall. Because the movie is hinging on her non-existent, non-historical relationship with John Smith, myth and really doesn't work at all. Just what we are giving throughout is just so uninspired and only earned because she didn't like the serious Cocoa Boy from her own tribe. This part of the video was seriously hard to think about between her and Elsa because both had serious potential as characters, but Pocahontas won at the very least on the fact they knew where to actually place her character arc from beginning to end, even if said story was boring and painfully bland in the entire end result. And once again, it's another story where the hero doesn't actually interact with the villain much, not until the direct-to-DVD sequel at the very least, which was absolutely stupid and gave no weight to the urgency of the impact of either of the two characters to really be separated by two differing people. It is just something that really wasn't going to work, mainly because of her historical context and what was trying to be aimed for a movie designed to be Oscar bait after Beauty and the Beast's nomination. It really didn't work at all. A good hero in practice, but poorly executed as a result for everything else. Lady and the Tramp is a very forgettable movie apart from the spaghetti scene where nothing really feels interesting apart from that. I mean, yeah, it's cute to see these two dogs get together, but you don't really have anything else to go by, which is why I ranked them higher like this, because I feel no ill will to this movie at all and still can't remember what the hell the story was supposed to give me. And going by that, I of course have to say that Lady is the main protagonist of the movie, and that's it. It just spends a lot of time building up her character before going off all the place with Tramp while cramming the entire ending with so many things, becoming so hard to keep up considering what we actually learned. And I really put it higher for the work in detail they did with the animation and the colors and of course the cute dogs, but I really just don't think the story had anything to offer great under the meandering between a cocker spaniel and a mutt. I think I said that wrong, but I don't care. I just have to put it here mainly because it's a main movie and the story is centered around her character, but just not compelling enough to be a great hero overall in any way. Oliver and Company as a whole is pretty underrated, but definitely far from the greats that Disney has to offer even in their mid-eras, and Oliver being the main protagonist doesn't really feel to have any great bearing on that point either. And I think that is the fault of the original story, so I've heard, with him being sidelined, which is exactly what he's doing in this film while focusing on the other characters, where at least I find him in the world he inhabits very charming because of songs like Why Should I Worry, but beyond that point for him being the hero, he's not really doing anything in that department. It's just what's around him rather than him that affects everything going forward and has no great basis for him being the titular character. And because of that, it feels a little convoluted to how others feel about the relationship with Oliver that is only marginally here and there and nothing else that you can't really feel with everyone clamoring to this one orange cat for some reason. I mean, really, like the song says, why should I worry, why should I care? It's just doo-wopulation and that's it. Sadly just a product of the Dickens story, and I guess they tried their best with the material at hand to fit a small kitten, but not enough to sell him as a compelling protagonist or hero in the sense of the word, and of course Disney as a whole. To be honest, I'm still surprised how high I'm ranking Strange World on my list because I hardly get invested in the story at all, and the three main heroes being three different generations searching for the strange world, because this is an idea that was already better served in their previous film, where this one lacks anything special because they decided to not have a villain at all, and I hardly understand that. And the main hero for this one is Searcher Clade, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and dealing with his relationship between his father, Jaeger Clade, played by Dennis Quaid, which weirdly rhymes, and finally his own son, Ethan Clade, and dealing with their own past in life over his father's wishes of being a farmer in the strange world. And because of that, it kind of gets in the way of the focus of the strange world itself and the pulp comic style that the movie is trying to be based on, where it clearly needed a villain because the conflict of the hero is just focused on two sides of his own family and the venture he has to go on from his past and his present, and it really lacks in being overall compelling. Because overall the story is okay with what they had, it's not unlikable in any way, but it just made you bored with what is actually focused on that is going on. Clearly a story world designed to be one way that clashes with other characters in another way and removes their overall impact in both senses. Where, like I said at the beginning of this, Encanto really did it better with its familial conflict because of the setting making more sense, where this one really didn't make sense being so grand and adventurous with its scope, where you really can't say that for their characters, and overall the audience actually thought that way when the film actually bombed. I just feel like the story as heroes would have been better if it had a villain role to contrast in order to make you feel for his side and development as a character giving reason to it. But overall, Searcher is just meh, belonging to being stuck in the middle for eternity and nothing more. Now this is going to disappoint a lot of people, knowing that I am a Disney fan myself, where I'm not a fan of Bambi, and I apologize for that. But it's just like I feel indifferent to him as a character and what he does in his life, because he's not very compelling as that character, but at least appreciate the world that Walt Disney wanted to show us on screen, which was really great and holds up well to this day. And only going to get straightened once the remake comes out, because yeah, we definitely need a remake of Bambi like The Lion King, because that's totally going to connect audiences to the characters who don't show emotion at all. Like, what can you do with a deer that talks, because you certainly don't feel going much deeper into the story after that moment with his mother. Just going in happy times with him being older, and you really don't feel nothing more than that. Falling in love, doing this and that, and nothing else in the story department. I just really don't feel emotionally attached to the story as others might, but appreciate its steps to provide a different world and Bambi as a cute character that does grow along his adventure. I just don't think he serves anything greater as a hero as just a regular deer that grows up typically in an animated realm. It's just the fact I'm not a fan of deer at all, and that's something to actually be fine about. Looking back on it, I still think Bolt is a fine film with a fine adventure, but not really looking back upon Bolt himself fondly, because I think the portrayal is a little bland coming from John Travolta for a dog who goes on this fun adventure to discover the meaning of being a regular dog rather than a super one he's led to believe. Because the idea of him being that was pretty great with a mini Truman Show for a dog type situation, but thinking about those circumstances, it's just a big yikes and very weird to actually show. But overall, it's just okay at best for what he does as a hero, thinking he is a superhero in its own way at first, but learning other ways to actually be that beyond the set of a movie in a world of make-believe. Just having a good time and satisfied to be a dog at the end of the film. The Aristocats is a fine movie, and I guess the same can be said for both Thomas O'Malley and Duchess. His journey is alright to become a hero in the sense of being a father figure and a stepfather to the kittens and falling in love with the Duchess, and somehow fighting with one of the most stupidest Disney villains ever in Edgar Balthazar, the weird choice of a butler fighting with a bunch of cats to inherit a fortune that is going to be left to a bunch of cats, if that actually made any sense. I just like Thomas in the sense that he would do whatever it takes to protect Duchess and the kittens to fulfill his role and the knowledge he has as a street smart feral cat. And I also find him to be very likable with his very smooth, charming voice, representing those sides of a cat from what you would normally expect in the pampered side that Duchess also shows. I mean, sadly there isn't much to say, which is why I include him in this number on the list, where if I did find more to say, he would surely be higher up. Just short fun, including characters like him that made the Aristocats a great time overall. Brother Bear remains to be a little bit underrated and overrated in some aspects. I mean, it certainly is a good time with most, but it does tussle a big back and forth with Kenai's own journey. Because I always like knowing that Joaquin Phoenix was playing a man who gets turned into a bear, learning from his own mistakes about what he did, or then again, the entire movie just isn't good as I remembered when I was growing up, but appreciate for what it had going in his character the most. I like the fact he has to go through the consequences of seeing his loved ones sacrificing themselves for them, and then blaming it on a bear through its callous surface level observation to exact vengeance, and then turned into one himself to teach him to see through another's eyes, feel through another's heart, and discovering the true meaning of brotherhood. To discover that through others like Koda and what that truly means, and what he took from that affects his viewpoint of why his own totem was a bear, and the same going for his brother who almost followed the same exact path about what he did in the tragedy of loss. But overall, it was just a little weird journey in execution of him being an actual bear. Like, that comedic tone and bright colors really just ruined what was built up to be a little bit more serious and compelling than other stories from before, but still overall remained to be a great time, and the connection he has to his brothers, both human and bear, that was really great, and I respect that for Joker Bear. The Rescuers Down Under is pretty alright, and I like the focus on Bernard, who begins as a reluctant janitor tagged along to rescue an orphan girl. Bernard is somewhat cautious and superstitious, and also suffers from the fear of the number 13. And of course, he is also somewhat nervous, as he often stutters. However, he is also proved to be very brave and courageous, as being incredibly strong for a mouse. And I just like that for somebody tasked with rescuing a human girl, for someone as small as what these mice are, and of course his relationship and caring for Miss Bianca, which is pretty great too at times, but still not at the point where I can have much to say, where the sequel really didn't do any of them favors for hardly feeling like they wanted to focus on them rather than what the film actually did. It's like they trade off in different places from the first film in the sequel, where the villain was more fun in its second compared to this one, and just this one having more things for them to do to establish the society that they are part of that helps for the greater good. An interesting choice, but certainly not the best, but I really like because Bernard was pretty interesting and the position as a reluctant hero. To be honest, I'm not really a fan of The Fox and the Hound, but I really think it's a good movie overall with the relationship between Todd and Copper. But I'm not fond of these characters compared to others because I hardly watched this movie despite those circumstances. I watched it once during my childhood and only just watched it again at the start of the year before this video. But those feelings still remain to be positive overall with what they were doing with said Fox and Hound, and the relationship that really didn't need a freaking female love interest like all these other animal films usually had. I mean, I just love the fact that they have to deal deal with how things change from your childhood and how nothing lasts forever, including the special bond they have that we see later on and having them both leave off in good terms. One of those co-hero films I appreciate, with the villain not inherently being villainous at all, but just the way nature plays out in the course of the films and where your life would take you, as seen with the path Todd goes on and where Copper ends up. Not the greatest, but alright for what it kind of had in that sense. Dumbo is also pretty alright, and also pretty fond of remembering compared to the other Disney classics. He's playful, innocent, fun-loving, and loves to be around his mother and hates being alone. He's somewhat naive, as he didn't realize Smitty and his gang were taunting him, or that the magic feather was simply a way of thinking. Understandable for someone as unique with him, with his big ears others would actually put down, and I respect that for being a relatable aspect to many people and their own features that society looks down upon. It's pretty interesting that everything is through his own facial expressions, as he doesn't speak at all, an oddity you wouldn't find in most Disney protagonists, and I think that remains to be unique in its own right for a major hero. He just lives to prove people wrong about appearances without even knowing it. His innocent naivety is just really great. I mean, he's the perfect character to just sit in the middle of lists like this, or just rank as 34 in my opinion. Just balanced speed, nothing truly great, but nothing truly bad too, and just overall good in the end. 101 Dalmatians is a pretty fun animated movie in both senses of the word, with the story and the style of its animation. And of course, our main hero is another great pet father, in Pongo being Roger Radcliffe's pet Dalmatian who matches with Perdita and has 15 puppies, including adopting 84 later on. He is playful and goofy and is extremely loyal, and actually took note of Roger's loneliness as a songwriting bachelor, thus making it his mission to find his good friend a suitable companion. With this, Pongo is the reason Roger and his wife Anita actually came together. This was an example of Pongo's love for Roger and why the two were shown to be the best of friends, having a mutual understanding of one another. And that's why he connected with Perdita and had those puppies as well, because of the bond they have, which was truly great to see and shown in the love of his puppies, which he goes to rescue them from Cruella de Vil, who unfortunately still overshines everything else in the film, including our lovable dog Hiro. But yeah, overall, I think he's a charming fellow who really cares much about his family, doing whatever it takes to rescue him and live well together at the very end. The interesting thing about Sleeping Beauty is the fact that the main character Aurora is not the main hero, and neither is the prince in that regard, despite defeating the villain. A role that actually remains to be her 3 fairy godmothers too, who actually have that personality and role to save her from Maleficent's curse in the end. I mean, Aurora actually only has 18 lines of dialogue and is relatively not in the film as much as you would expect, but she also isn't that bad either. Just not the hero in the sense of the world with what these 3 actually do. And because of that, I really had a debate on this, but really felt like that responsibility of the hero was divided into separate parts, with Philip taking the final blow that really saves the day and everyone else doing their own part for Aurora herself, which is very neat, revolving around a petty fairy who wasn't invited to see her own birth. Because Sleeping Beauty is a good film and its world is still one of the most unique that Disney had to offer in a style that most people attach to in the realm of fantasy, and it's why I had to sort of rank this high, because of the mixed bag of actual heroes that are separate from each other, because it really had something special to offer that most people don't even notice at first, but do so when you see the inspiration for Fantasyland at Disneyland and whatnot. Just a truly great film with a great aesthetic to it. Jungle Book remains to be a good time, and I find that to be fun with what Mowgli offered in his adventures with Baloo and the other animals in the jungle. I just thought it was very interesting to see him in this place as a boy growing up in a different environment and trying to find his identity with that, even if he knows he's a human and not really knowing of what it means to be one, and connecting with Baloo to see it the way he wants to. I mean, it's not the best and has elements that lacked overall that could have been improved, but it just was okay for its time and where it wanted to go and having something to do with it. I mean, yeah, he's not the greatest as well with what goes on in his adventure, but it certainly is fun and interesting to see that world he interacts with himself and leading him to rejoin with the main village. He does come off as incredibly brave in situations that normally would scare other humans, which is admirable, but also learning that this can only take you so far before ending up being killed, as he almost learned with his interaction with Shere Khan near the end of the film. And I think that is a very enjoyable aspect to his character in order for him to learn and grow as a person, even if the ending just feels weird again, involving a female love interest dragging him down to his happy ending, something I just learned to hate because it's done in so many films in Disney's own past, which I'm at least happy it doesn't actually happen as much anymore, because that is an annoying trope. And of course the fact that it's usually not that easy for me to find in my own life. Snow White remains to be the perfect start for Disney, and I think it's okay for her to close out being designed for those I have not particularly fond memories but very good feelings about as heroes, despite being another situation where it appears she isn't great as a hero princess at face value at all, but actually understanding that this is the truth that she is the hero position when the fucking prince has no character to him at all other than kissing her at the very end. Very creative development, mind you. I just really can't dislike her either for being the starting point for Disney and animated movies as a whole, and having the greatest singing voice of all Disney princesses no matter what way you think of it. Just very memorable falsetto that you hear ringing when you think of fairy tales and princesses as a whole. And then the underlying elements are pretty great when you see that she actually suffers from abuse from her stepmom and pushes actually through in the film and influences other characters for the better, a stepping stone that other Disney princesses and other Disney heroes would actually have, from making the hunter realize the error of his ways because of her stepmom's arrogance and inspiring the dwarves to clean up for the better, having an overall fun time and only stopped by her stepmother in disguise not knowing what she has planned that causes her to sleep forever because of a poison apple. Of course, it's not particularly great or interesting as you might expect, but the ideas they had to make this their first film really makes her an enjoyable character for what she provided to the world and the future Disney characters as we know today. Just a naturally charming girl who pushes through in the face of adversity, and that is something to be inspired by. Now this was something I planned from the start, to have Princess Anna ranked this high because I really believe in that. Because despite everything Frozen did that was really rushed and I really don't like now in a film that is still somewhat decent, Anna remained to be the one that was actually unaffected by the story's problems and one that actually had a decent story arc as being the main protagonist of the film and learning to help her sister out for the better. She is just a very bubbly, charming, expressive character that really makes you like her for what she does even if she is naive at various points, including trying to marry a man she just met who turns out to be the fucking villain of the story and one of the worst that Disney had to offer. But besides that, she actually does learn from that and actually knows what Elsa is going through finally with her burdens and pushes through to actually help her out for the better because she actually loves her sister. Where her love and compassion is what makes the movie stand out a lot more because of that connection and actually learning a bit from Kristoff even though the relationship was very underdeveloped or not even well warranted as much as you would think, but that's still fine overall. And of course, her connection with Olaf in both films was pretty great, pushing through for the better and knowing what she had in her youth and using that to solve her future, to tackle on responsibilities that she does struggle with but still keeps going. And overall, looking back on it, she is the reason why Frozen is an actually overall good time with what she had, but just sad because the film is just brought on by these various rushed elements and characters that service it for the worse rather than the better, where fortunately Anna just feels very natural within that role, and I think that was pretty great. And yeah, the same can be said in Frozen 2 for the most part, where I really just can't hate her, but just wish she was given more time to fit the roles that they wanted for her to do, and of course Elsa that would have made them a lot higher on this list, but just okay with where she deserves to be up here higher on the Disney tier list. Robin Hood is a very nice, charming film that somehow has to get a remake as well that doesn't feature any human characters to it, because the way they made the story furrified was pretty interesting, and that is something I really shouldn't have explained it that way, but sort of right to do so because that's what it really is. And I just think Robin Hood in that right is a very good, charming hero who fits the definition properly to what he does to provide for the poor from the rich of those like Prince John. Robin Hood is a good and generous person at heart and is beloved by the townspeople for his own deeds and uses his skills in archery and disguising to help out for the better, which I really think makes him stand out more in that hero role. How he just goes out of his way to provide for the common good that royals like John had ignored, stuck up in their own ways while the king was gone, is noble and worthy of being in the upper half of Disney heroes that I rank. Another noteworthy trait of Robin Hood is the fact that he holds a surprisingly realistic view of life. He is aware that he cannot easily marry Marianne due to his status of being an outlaw, being a danger to her. He also isn't very imaginative with romantic scales, scoffing at Little John's notion of proposing to her out of the blue and riding off into the sunset, just adding a little bit more relatability to his character that makes him very real and connectable to what he does both in the old story and in the film, which really does add to the fun the movie actually had that did have some merit to it even if scenes are recycled and deserve better elements overall to actually end it. To Big Hero 6 is pretty alright, and so is Hiro, who is the hero of the film and has Hero in its own title. I mean, it's clear he's not my favorite personally, but he does have a lot of great moments for his character to develop in his relationship with Tadashi and finding that again in Baymax, and showing that through his intelligence accomplishing many things for someone his age in the invention of microbots and how his brother saw the potential in him to use that for the better, which he learns throughout the film and within the team he grows along with, was actually pretty great overall. And with that, he carried a lot of pride with that knowledge, but also had the softer, shyer side to him, wanting to do more and learning to connect with others through Baymax despite not having a great personality he could connect with in that regard. How he learned right from wrong and not going down destructive paths like vengeance, which I will give credit for Callahan providing to balance that out despite not being a great villain that was warranted in any way. One that he could learn from so he could be better for his own friends and family as what a hero should be. And knowing that is how he was able to develop traits he learned from for the better to be a leader and devoted to help making the world a better place. It's just how his complexity as a character that is certainly intelligent but makes imperfect decisions really makes him stand out a lot more as a good modern hero that Disney should be proud of showing. Not the greatest in most respects, but certainly the one just being worthy of being a hero overall. Cinderella remains to be an underrated character people misjudge a lot due to the portrayal of the original story that had a lot more to be desired in its way for its characters that still really had something great for her as a protagonist that most people overlook and was certainly shown in its sequels and its own remake being the only property that they have ever done justice in other ways they're normally certainly not good at doing. How it's just that for most of her life she was abused by her stepmother to serve her as a servant and nothing more, where she still pushed through despite the circumstances, and it's the trait shown to Cinderella 3 that makes her stand out a lot more for being the second Disney princess whose impact was just as big as the first for saving Disney when others thought otherwise, which is why more people should appreciate her on that fact alone, depending on the way you actually look at it. How she really doesn't allow bitterness to take over her life and stand strong as independent, knowing what she can achieve for a better life for herself, unafraid of actually standing up for herself when she feels that she is right despite the circumstances around her own family, where that is all well rewarded when she is handed the opportunity by Fairy Godmother and connecting with Prince Charming, who sadly didn't have a character in the film but remedied later on as we see, just showing how she does earn those moments, staying true to who she is as a person and of course her own parents, being strong and independent in her own unique feminine way without doing anything you would normally associate with that in modern times, and how she deserved that happy ending to become a princess. All in all, despite not being a great story, Cinderella made to be a good hero who chooses to stand tall and be positive in the darkest of times. Once again, I feel justified putting Pinocchio in this place as a hero for what he did to add on after Snow White in Disney's second feature film. I mean, he isn't the greatest compared to the others, but because he's just a boy, but he really has charm as a hero in learning to become a real boy and the consequences that life provides that he's supposed to learn from against to know what it really means to live. It is just a very interesting way that he moves from one point to another to learn what not to do because Jiminy Cricket is not very good at his job. It might seem a little crazy looking back on it, but I really just like his journey as a character overall, developing through these various morals and knowing right from wrong. Like, it isn't bad overall knowing that they have their own consequences to it that they really want to teach to young kids, and I really think that that was cute overall. Just not the circumstance of other characters surrounding him like Jiminy Cricket not doing his job properly or Geppetto not being a responsible father, because that actually wouldn't allow him to go on his very own journey. In a way, it's a better starting point for Disney heroes, even more so than what Snow White provided through the sacrifice Pinocchio does at the very end that warrants him becoming a real boy and a true hero, and of course seeing what is right and wrong and choosing to go for the right path at the end of the journey. Just a nice start and moral lesson for the entire studio that lives on in the modern era to positive effect if you ignore the blatant disrespect the live action remake did. Tarzan is an overall good film, and of course, so is Tarzan himself as a character and hero, being the one who grew up in the jungle in a different way than what Mowgli did that is more realistic due to the fact he was raised by gorillas and becoming the ape man as a result. The development his personality had was really great and sets him apart amongst other Disney heroes in a unique way while still being human overall in what he lost when his parents died. Tarzan is extremely brave, loyal, and honorable character. He cares deeply about his family and friends and was willing to risk his life to save them. How it is shown despite others not fully trusting him or even his own enemies like Clayton, trying to save his life before he accidentally hung himself, where despite being the savage raised in the jungle, he is just shown to be a compassionate human even more civilized than what most men are at first glance. How he's just more than what we see, highly intelligent for someone like him, and skilled at navigating the jungle more than you realize that elevates him more as a character. And for those reasons, he is very good at telling when people are telling lies, even though he can be tricked. How he also shows that he is surprisingly romantic as shown with his interactions with Jane, often complimenting her, protecting her, and giving her flowers while proclaiming her to be the best woman there is. How the film just has a lot of those elements to really like about his character to show how there's more than meets the eye and the relationships he has with his entire family, human or not, and how others learn to understand that. But of course, it's not as great as the others in my opinion that I hold higher in regard. end. Now, this is something that both might surprise you or not, considering my love for the original Wreck-It Ralph and of course my seething hatred of its sequel. But overall, Wreck-It Ralph's character arc as the bad guy of the film wanting to do something heroic is still really great and really special for me, for someone who is a passion of arcades and games in general, and finding your own place when others say you can't, sticking to the same code. It is just so charming and endearing to see him go through this for a bad guy who really isn't a bad guy at all, and just a dude who wants to be recognized by others for who he is, which is more important for the hero's journey overall. Just sad that I really couldn't rank him higher because of the other heroes and the fact that the sequel still exists and drags his character development down, which I can ignore in this video thankfully, but still have to acknowledge considering that he continues being the main hero of the story alongside Vanellope. But for the most part, I just love his journey in the first film, knowing what it really means to be a hero in a certain way and his relationship with characters like Vanellope, the trials they have to go through together through villains like Turbo, to not repeat the arrogant mistakes of the past for the better, and for others to actually acknowledge him for who he is as a person rather than what image he was supposed to be designed to be that most people look down upon. I mean, sure, his strength of wrecking stuff is pretty great and useful, but it's more of the strength of his own character who pushes through in any situation that allows him to be a great hero in its own right. How this very movie just makes so many twists work in all the right ways, and how it really understands the path it wanted to take a game villain to be its hero. All in all, a lovable character who is more than what he seems. Zootopia has a lot of great elements to it, and Judy Hopps certainly stands out as the best of them overall. She is fiercely optimistic and independent, and since childhood she harbored a dream to become a police officer, solely for the opportunity to help those in need and make the world a better place. She cares deeply for the well-being of others, including her own family, friends, and Nick in the entire story. How she just constantly does things that others don't believe is possible for someone her size, as stated by the wiki, due to being a rabbit, a species associated with such high-stakes occupation. Judy faces continuous doubt and underestimation from those around her, from her parents to local bullies. But nevertheless, she uses her opposers to increase her determination and become progressively more insistent on reaching her goals than ever before with each naysayer, something that I really love. How she believed in the importance of always trying and making an effort to reach her goals, no matter what. She is very idealistic in this sense, having set dream and not necessarily taking potentially negative outcomes into consideration, which unfortunately made her too idealistic for her own good in that regard, until she found out herself unprepared for the negative aspects within the city upon her first residential day, leaving her to fall victim to bigotry and manipulation, which is actually a pretty great message if you actually think about it. Despite the odds and hardships, Judy actually remained optimistic, determined, adapting herself to the environment and those around her to build up upon the way she presents herself and pursue her own goals. She is clever and resourceful, which provides to be her greatest asset, and how she tarnishes the stereotype of being a dumb buddy, being intelligent enough to outsmart professional con artists like Nick, several times of course. Months of training at the Zootopia Academy has also left her very tactical, with an impressive amount of physical prowess. During times of chaos, she can also quickly take charge of the situation by concocting an efficient plan on the spot, being daring enough to take dangerous chances to potentially end the day victorious. And because of that, those points are certainly true for a character that I like and the world that they were trying to build, with the actual well-intentioned messages that they were trying to show that both kids and adults had a decent time connecting with, and that's what makes her stand out as much. And surprisingly, I actually wanted to have a lot to say for her own character. Meet the Robinsons always remains to be the greatest underrated 3D film that Disney has ever done, and still one of my personal favorites despite ranking other films more higher on their other merits. How I love the world and promise of the future, and found that really compelling through the eyes of Louis Robinson, or just Louis in the case before the end of the film, because his character is a genius who pushes through in the face of failure where others reject him because of that, and causes his journey to find his real mom and family as a result. To see why he was rejected and try to restore that for the better, and also learn that that's not always the case through characters like his own son, who he doesn't know yet of the time, dragging him to the future to work on that and the consequences he indirectly caused in characters like Goob, who turned out to be a villain because of that rejection. How he learned so much throughout his own future family that he must keep moving forward because that's where we learn to succeed from our own failures. How the future is that representation that you must keep moving on despite the odds that are clearly against you. You can't give up or focus on the past because you'd be stuck and nothing would change, where that is something to appreciate for Louis to actually learn. And how it actually actually all came from him learned by his future self, and how that statement he made of keep moving forward was actually attributed from Walt Disney himself, which I really connected with. Loving the film for sticking with that clear message that he believed in and opening new doors and taking new ideas for a better tomorrow, and how nothing can stop you from succeeding in doing so if you take that message to heart. So all in all, Lewis remains to be a great underrated Disney hero for taking the simple message to heart and succeeding before the ending of the movie even happens. Just a great character who pushes through in the face of failure that others actually perceive, and it's one that we should all take to heart. Once again, I feel justified in this ranking, moving into my top 20 heroes with of course the one and only Winnie the Pooh. I mean, I know some of you might fight me on this ranking considering how iconic he is, but considering what I have praised for the other last few on this list, then maybe you can be satisfied by this point that was just kind of dragged down because of how other people are just making these stupid ass horror films that aren't good in any regard. The public domain remaining to be both a blessing and a curse despite what Disney held on for the character for so long. But anyways, there's just nothing to really hate about Winnie the Pooh as a character, especially the fact that he has multiple Disney films, which I'm very thankful I don't have to cover yet to focus on him solely. Cause what is not to love about a honey-loving bear with little brain to him, where of course everything around him doesn't involve huge stakes at all because they're just lovable creatures overall, and frankly not much warranting in the case of what you expect as a hero and his story, but just enough that everyone just loves to watch regardless of his innocent naivety. How he's just become the leader of the group because of his standing with Christopher Robin being his favorite, and of course his very optimistic attitude and wisdom because of his big heart. He just has that knack of capturing your very heart in a very special way that makes him stand out as a great hero in that regard, and everyone else would actually agree with that. Nothing much more to say because he really says it all and shows it all. Now this might actually surprise a lot of you considering what I personally think about Treasure Planet being a great underrated classic, but I think you would understand my position of characters afterward. Because Jim Hawkins is truly a fantastic hero, just on his own path without any love interest or whatever attached to him, and more focused on the relationship he has with the villain in John Silver, one being the father figure he never had in his life. And it's just so great knowing that his entire journey is to chart his own course in his life. It's how they even emphasize his bad boy nature at the beginning, and it really sets off his journey apart, understanding where he is coming from, trying to do something better for his and his own mother's life after his father left him, which a lot of people can actually relate to. Jim is also very brave, selfless, strong-willed, independent, and loyal to his allies. He is also very friendly and willing to help strangers, especially if they are injured or lost. He is very fun-loving, jokey, sarcastic, mischievous, charismatic, and of course very dreamy in the sense of longing for something in his life, of course. Despite his great intelligence, he can also do very stupid and reckless things, such as him breaking the law countless times or driving recklessly with silver in the sky, but has a heart of gold and refuses to embrace the typical greedy and ruthless pirate life like his pirate enemies, which I really think Silver appreciates at the very end when he decides to save him over the treasure he was always searching for. How their relationship between the hero and the villain is very deep, and another element that really elevates him to another level so he can find his own path in his life, and seeing that at the end where you really see him change for the better because of this, being more open and bright from the reserved bad boy we see at the beginning. A great choice that the directors actually made in both Musker and Clements. Just a really great character and hero arc that you have to appreciate. Tiana is actually somewhat underrated in The Princess and the Frog due to the fact of the circumstances surrounding the film being the last original adapted 2D animated film that Disney has done recently. Because she really is a great hero who is steadfast in achieving her dreams that her father had and doing it for the better of her own family and proving others wrong. I mean, yeah, the fact that she has to be a frog kind of ruins it a little, but not as much where she still has something to grow from and help Prince Naveen overall. Her hard work is really admirable and something to show that it's not earned easily, making her a lot more relatable to the degree to become a Disney princess, and how she learns that she should be more selfless, caring about others from her workaholic nature that pushed others out, overall learning to try to open up to others like Naveen shows, and how he actually learns to do the same in that degree. Tiana is actually shown to be quite capable of in dangerous situations and moments of physical conflict. Throughout the film, of course, continuously rescues Naveen from life-threatening situations and fends off predators within the bio, and even Dr. Facilier and his horde of sinister shadow demons. Her heroism is actually ultimately put at the forefront of the film's climax, where the city of New Orleans is hurtled into a high state of peril, where only hopes of survival is being with Tiana's own willpower and the aforementioned sense of humor. Her nature being raised to do whatever it takes makes her stand up both as the eventual princess and a regular everyday hero, and that's something you have to actually love about her. Not the best certainly, but still the most relatable in the field of working hard to achieve your dreams, which she actually does in the very end. Alice is actually a delightful protagonist in her own film going on her adventure throughout Wonderland, and Catherine Beaumont really captured her perfectly through that curiosity about the world around her, and you can feel that wherever she went in her next adventure in Wonderland. I just find it interesting, like Pinocchio, how they just go along in different environments that really add into how they turned out in the end. Like, it's not in the sense of the hero having a grand journey or a call to go on, but just a fun addition to be in the world around her that is wacky and beyond all reason. Oh, it's really just seeing things around through her eyes, and I really think the animation did justice to that point really well. Just so chaotic through the point of a young girl, not directly of course, but clearly shown throughout her own unique experiences with a positive attitude going into it and into her own mind, to where she looks for that creative imagination that is somehow expressed with her proper personality as well. Just an interesting look into the mind of one girl that you really wouldn't expect but understand to what we see and look for in kids. Thinking about it overall, I think Peter Pan deserves to be placed right here based upon the fact that Catherine Beaumont also voices Wendy Darling in this film, who Peter actually connects with, and the fact that the villains followed each other, so it actually makes sense. But Peter Pan in this film really represents a true hero of our childhood, and the fact that the boy who never grew up and takes pride into making every day an adventure. His cockiness is also pretty great and really elevates to how he is the boy that never ages, just has fun in his whole life and lives for the thrill of adventure. There's just a lot about him that is really charming in an adventurous story that most people would expect when they picture a childhood hero, which is exactly what he is made out to be, especially to our main characters in the darlings, including the boys in this case. There's just a lot to his character that represents what the image of a hero looks like that you have to appreciate Disney for doing, and that how that contrasts back and forth with Captain Hook being his villain, where of course being a young boy, Peter can be rather impractical and conceited at times, but when it comes to rescuing his friends, he's far more mature than any adult can be. He's respected and loved by nearly every inhabitant of Neverland, and that's something that can be admired by everyone, and the fact that he was willing to accept others like the darlings wanting to go back and actually growing up, still remembering along the way, and something to be appreciated and something that will live forever when thinking of Disney heroes. One of the things you would never expect me to say is that Kuzco is actually a great hero from a great film like The Emperor's New Grooves, because of the fact he begins as an arrogant emperor who cares about himself, and that's about it. How he goes along this adventure because of the fact of Yzma wanting to secretly poison him and failing because of her own lovable idiot servant Kronk getting the wrong potion that forced them to become a llama instead, and going on this journey with Pacha to get back to normal. One where you have to appreciate that the entire arc he goes through is to learn what others are like for someone who lives in a historical equivalent of an ivory tower that barely looks down upon the people below, rejecting them at first, but of course forced to see another side where he actually does learn as a result. How it's just so great he's able to be a compelling protagonist by being a llama and also having a vibrant attitude, being a very young emperor. Like, there's literally a lot to like about his unlikable personality, and David Spade really did a good job to show that to us. And of course, his interaction and relationship with Pacha from the beginning to end was very sweet, dismissing him off as first for his own summer palace, and then actually growing to what he has in his very family and what he does hurting llamas and whatnot, having a newfound appreciation for those he actually rules over, and embracing that at the very end of the movie. Just a great way to introduce a character that no one would actually find to be likable at first, but learning to grow over the course of experiencing new things out of their tiny little bubbles. Ariel is actually underrated in some aspects to how people perceive her character, because she really is a great protagonist when you actually look at the details. Because The Little Mermaid remains to be a great story to birth the new age of Disney animation, where the work everyone did to bring her to life was truly fantastic. She is just a great character, being overall a bubbly, hopeful person who longs for more in her life that she's not allowed to do, searching for a world she desperately wants to be a part of, where she is kind of a rebel, not following what she is supposed to do, being the daughter of King Triton, trying to connect with the human world so desperately. I mean, she is also shown to be caring about her family too, so she really can't complain about that, but just comes from a result of her close-minded father because of something that happened in their life when their mother died, but realizing what she does later on for the better and connecting with Eric, how she expressive she really is and excited to experience the human world despite having nothing to say, and of course what was told otherwise by her own people, and acting selfless to save Eric at the end, and him doing the same in return that most people overlook. How she remains to be a positive figure throughout the film that really makes her father see that, as he was the one who had to change when both Eric and Ariel worked together because they loved each other, and despite what they were both. How they were different but still connectable because of the human and mermaid elements that both found interesting. I mean, there is a lot more to say that I could say that I want to explain later, but the basis is there overall that shows she is a good character, instead of what most people say that they really need to rewatch to understand those points that makes her stand out as a hero herself, where that is something you would actually understand if you watched a remake that destroys those very good points also. Atlantis is still heavily underrated today, and so is Milo Thatch to that degree. I mean, there's just a lot to like about being the first major Disney hero who wears glasses, who is just a nerd, and about the legendary city being a linguist himself. How he remains to be true to his grandfather who raised him when his parents died when he was young, and shared that journey to prove that he was right, that it did existed, and Michael J. Fox really did portray that youthful energy to his character very well. His awkwardness connecting to other characters in the series really does make him a relatable character, because it really was just something he wasn't good at to begin with, and something most people can actually understand. Focus on trying to fund and prove the existence of Atlantis just for his grandfather and just because he wants to actually see it, and just for his plain curiosity, and how that actually plays a major part in connecting with the people of Atlantis because of his knowledge, and of course eventually Kita herself, making a relation to someone who never got to experience life above because of what they were forced to do going underground after a mistake thousands of years ago. Like him getting the girl was also pretty great to see someone as awkward as him get, and how he manages to go against bigger forces like Rourke in the end, where he finally knows what they were there for. How he manages to change the others' hearts to do what is right because of what they all connected with personally and what they were there for. His compassion for the people of Atlantis is truly admirable, where people should actually see this film because it has that unique cast of characters to supplement his own viewpoint. He's just the perfect protagonist for this type of film that was just so grand and adventurous that Strange World never actually got in the end. I mean, the thing that held him back the most is the fact that it feels short and the pacing actually deserves to have more to offer showcase to this. But other than that, he remains to be a great overall hero to a great story. Now, this was personally a surprise for me, considering what I've just covered that I actually watched more over time, but that The Great Mouse Detective remains to be a great film from a darker Disney era. And as a result, Basil of Baker Street is actually a great hero who is a takeoff of the classic Sherlock Holmes character, where he himself actually models his career after the famous detective. Basil is portrayed as a brilliant, plucky mouse who refuses to back down, or his end is pursuit against Professor Ratigan, which makes him very tenacious. Basil also comes off as the jack of all trades at several points in the movie, showcases skills in areas such as science, history, and disguise, not to mention being physically capable. Just a great take on the type of story in a much smaller world being part of a bigger one overall. And I just liked what they tried to build with his character and his relationship with Ratigan that plays off very well and pretty great within that type of Sherlock Holmes story in the mouse's world. And the only sad thing I have to say about this is how short I have to keep this, because I wrote this at 2 in the morning and had nothing else to actually say about his character. But overall, I just love Basil for being a greatly skilled detective that really fits in being a hero for what he does. Beauty and the Beast, of course, is a classic, and so is Belle as the main hero of the entire story. There is just a lot to like about her as the protagonist, and something you would have to admire, where everyone thinks she is weird for being a woman with certain ideas to aspire from for someone like her in her own life, and choosing to do that by reading various books. She is very kind and compassionate, and choosing to be selfless to save her own father from being captive, choosing to do so rather than being kidnapped and enslaved as others actually suggest. That she chooses this for the love she has in others, and something the Beast actually agrees to, where even he allows her to go on later at any point because he generally didn't care at the time, knowing he was probably doomed before connecting with her, and then growing together to find something, being brave enough to solve his problems. Just how there is a lot to like about her character rather than to dislike because of what she displays that makes her one of the best of this type, and makes the ending more well deserved for what was involved in the process for the Beast to become human again. How she actually connects with that and actually knows right and wrong in a person, like what Gaston shows as a beast and the Beast that shows as a human, that allows her to shine and will continue to shine for a long time, for a story that is deemed as Disney's greatest movie ever, but not just my personal favorite, mind you. The Hunchback of Notre Dame remains to be one of my most favorite Disney movies ever, and one also directed by the guys who just brought us Beauty and the Beast also, making this placement perfect for a character like Quasimodo. He's just a very lovable, kind, compassionate human being who was just born with deformities that causes the world and Frollo to think otherwise about him as a monster when he really is not. Taught the wrong things about the world, but learning about the right things in people like Esmeralda, who showed the same kindness to him and allows him to shine as a person that the public was supposed to see all along. How it shows that perception is everything, and through the message of the monster and the man in both Frollo and Quasi to see the light in his eyes all along, which is amazing despite being manipulated by a callous dark man like Frollo, being the contrast in the depths of hellfire and the sins of man's own dark heart. I just don't know how you can really hate him at all, where I really think he's just probably one of the better looking Disney dudes overall, and I really mean that to how he looks, because it really adds on to his personality as a character, being so lovable and one you would really want to hang out with, and being misunderstood for just being a certain way and conforming to society's definition and looks that Frollo justifies is wicked and must be purged, and seeing that in the end where it's rewarded that he saved the day because he is a kind human being. So all in all, I really think he perfectly belongs right here on this list as number 9. Aladdin was one of my favorite characters as a child, and I still hold him to that high in this regard, because there's just a lot to like about his story in being a street rat trying to survive with Abu and helping others out even if it results in him stealing to do so. And of course, the more important thing is showcasing how he connects with the genie and becomes great friends with him. The most unexpected thing to happen concerning the master and servant relationship they usually have, but serving under the promise of understanding and trying to free him in the end. Going through this journey of discovering his love for the princess who disguises herself to see what was out there and away from her responsibilities as a princess. And how he sees a way to get a chance by pretending to be someone he's not, and learning that looks are not always everything, and how Genie tries to show him this despite not seeing at first until later, where he does connect with her and finally realizes what is important on the inside of his own character. How he's tested to do this for the sake of love, breaking what he gained with Genie until he himself is finally revealed when Jafar gets what he wants in the lamp, and finally understanding what he uses to be best as a street rat to finally save the day, and actually change his ways to free the Genie in the end to fulfill his promise, and realizing that she loves him for who he is instead. How this tale shows that there's more than meets the eye to our characters, loving for who we are no matter what status we have in life, and I think that was always charming to see, especially with that relationship that both of them have that make this movie great, to act for the selfless of each other rather than the selfishness of oneself, and I really love that. Now this, my friends, is a double feature in a film like Tangled, where both Rapunzel and Eugene are both great co-heroes who discover what they want in each other. Because the fact remains is how Rapunzel is the best Disney princess who wants to see the lights and nothing more than to experience the outside world for the first time with the best charm of any Disney character, and how Flynn Rider discovers who he is, making a name for himself in the entire world. Where no, I'm not including their background from this series because I'm just focused on the films and only the films, and think it was just great overall without extending those details at all. I just really love the dynamic where they both have to help each other out in their own unique way despite not trusting each other at first for what they had originally. For Rapunzel, where she still remains to be steadfast despite Gothel's manipulations for her character to stay inside the tower, where she eventually doesn't listen and goes outside herself, and how Eugene is very protective of her own dreams and understanding what his life was all about in front of him and saving her from that very mistake in the end to remove Gothel's grip once and for all. It's just a very wonderful story and very wonderful heroes deserving to be this high up the list, and I really couldn't ask for anything greater than what Tangled provided in that regard. To follow up with my double feature is another one in, of course, Lilo and Stitch, because why wouldn't I include both Lilo and Stitch in a film that is titled after them? Because this still remains to be my favorite Disney film ever since I was a little baby, where it's because of their own relationship throughout the film being outcast from their own society, how they connect with each other because of how chaotic they are in their own right, and how Lilo understands how he's actually feeling being lost and finding that in the meaning of Ohana. Just how important family is no matter how broken it could be, like how Nani and Lilo are at the beginning, and how Stitch really connected them together for the actual better despite the circumstances. It's just how you can't really get any better than this, and how you understand why I feel this way about a film that actually takes place in my home in Hawaii. Not specifically where I was from because it's on Kauai, but understandable because all the islands are our home in that right, and seeing that through Lilo and Stitch really connected me on another personal level. It's just how he grows from being very chaotic to being very loving and doing whatever it takes to save his Ohana to ensure that nobody gets left behind in the end, and how it's just all well earned in the end for the most charming Disney film that was ever made. And it's something you just have to be cold-hearted to disagree with this position, because they really have something great to it that connects people that could be regarded as outcasts. All in all, pretty great, and there's nothing you could really say that could stop me from enjoying this. The Lion King is actually definitely Disney's greatest film ever, and Simba is a pretty great protagonist to be a part of that. I just really love his journey that he grows from when he starts as a young ignorant cub, learning and growing in the world to be king later on, and to be like his father whom he loves dearly, and the same around. And how people like his own uncle are just so petty to see, knowing that he will be a part of that, passing him and doing whatever it takes to ruin that by using his blissful childlike ignorance to ruin his life for his own gain. How he dives into doing this because he likes the idea of being king without caring about the responsibilities and being faced with the burden that he might have caused his own father's death, running away forever and living a new life with Timon and Pumbaa. How he learns to cope with that in the message of Hakuna Matata and no worries to be free, a part of that pain for a time, until he grows up himself and the past comes back, remembering who he is, and when he sees his father coming back in the sky, knowing that this is always a part of it and preparing him for his responsibilities to restore the circle of life that is supposed to happen. Just growing from where he was as a child to take his rightful place, and everything he learned learned over the years of growing up to fulfill his place in life, and that is something that truly should be admired for Disney's most powerful story ever. It's not my personal favorite, but it certainly is Disney's best overall, and deserved of being number 5 in those ways if you understand what I mean. Simba would just go down as one of the greats for not only being an animal, but for really having a great emotional compelling arc that happens to take place within the message of the circle of life. Mulan actually remains to be my favorite female hero ever, from the original tale to of course the Disney version that isn't the live action version at all. Because there's just a lot to love to how she really is made that makes her stand out as a hero that goes beyond gender roles, that has inspired many young girls and possibly boys to do something beyond what has already been designed to do. And it's all done out of love of her family and not because she needs to prove something that men do that women can also do, but just one where her duties lie to bring honor to her own family that she loves, knowing that she doesn't want her father to go serve at her own age, disguising as a man to fulfill that and showing us the many ways beyond typical strength to actually solve her problems. How she's actually more technically minded and smart in various situations that others actually never thought to achieve that makes her stand out as a great hero. And it's something that's well rewarded in the end when everyone bows to respect her for saving all of China from the evil forces that also did respect her as well, which is pretty nice to see in a very unique way. How there is just so much to love about her character that is more serious for a Disney animated story that is also pretty fun too. It's just how you can see that it's done out of her heart rather than trying to prove something, and knowing who she truly is in the inside that the world should be able to see for the better rather than repress it for the worse. Everything she does just really feels earned and well rewarded, and I really couldn't ask for a better protagonist than what Mulan provided overall. That, and of course I love ancient China as a whole as another reason why I like Mulan and the animation style that the movie tries to pay respect to. And of course I cannot forget that final moment of the film where her father actually embraces her, knowing that the greatest gift that he ever had was in fact her. You know what? I think Mirabelle is an excellent protagonist, and I really believe that because Encanto remains to be the greatest Disney film released in the past 5 years, no matter what way you think of it, where she really is the spice that brings the entire film to life. How she really wasn't given any gift but proves to be strong in her own way, and how she helps her family that she loves, and is also another great hero that wears glasses. How she tries to prove her worth in a family that is put with so much high expectations and pressure because they have these magical gifts that each child has to deal with, and actually discovering that her ability is allowing her family members to see the best in themselves away from those expectations set upon them that causes the cracks to happen both physically and emotionally in the house and in the family. How she remains to be a great protagonist who helps her own antagonizing Abuela to realize the harsh ways that she causes her family to be broken overall. One that is actually understandable just so she can actually live up to what her Pedro did to sacrifice himself and save the family to the state they are in now, to use the miracle in a way to help provide the people for the better, but forgetting the importance of that for what your family provides as a whole, no matter who you are with powers or no powers. And the fact that also remains is how she is the most fun Disney hero ever, the most comedic one that you can have a good laugh at depending on the circumstances, for providing something even greater than what her gifted sisters and cousins have, which she really does shine in her own right. How she was given this magical ability that helps build the family up and the town for the better in the end. Everything leading up to Mirabelle being the most important person in their own right like everyone else, and how Disney characters with glasses actually make them to be the best overall. I mean, considering what we already know in the definition of a hero, it would be a no-brainer to include Hercules this high on the list, but not for me personally, and that's why I really think Hercules remains to be pretty great in the textbook definition of what a hero looks like and should be, because he really represents what the hero's journey it should be to a great degree, and I really mean that. Because what is not to love about him being the main character of the film with incredible strength and incredible character who always wants to go the distance for anyone else, which is one of the best Disney songs ever made. His journey is truly everything, and his compassion to help others is truly what makes him stand out to be the best hero ever in a story that really wants to show us what heroes truly are, apart from our superficial definitions to the value of what real ones are actually like, and how Hades actually contributes to that in the self-fulfilling prophecy. And you just have to like how his strength isn't primarily physically, which of course is actually great, but mostly mentally to actually solve other people's problems, as one of his family, his friends, and everyone else. And because of that, I sadly can't actually say much because I already made an entire video that chronicles his journey perfectly, and it's one you should really check out on my own full thoughts of him as a hero, because he really is the best and earns it for what sacrifices he performs to become a god, how he earns everything he actually goes through. Overall, a great hero that Disney should be proud of for actually being the one true definition of what a hero actually is. And yep, the greatest Disney hero that was ever created was in fact Moana, and that is excluding my own biases as a Hawaiian and Polynesian myself. She is sea-loving, headstrong, strong-willed, and practically fearless, and physically capable. Though she has moments of self-doubt, she truly has great pride in who she is, and generally is too stubborn to back away from new challenges. Moana approaches new experiences and tasks with the utmost seriousness, and will stand her ground to fight what she values even when all seems lost. Where despite her lack of experience outside Motunui, Moana can present herself as an imposing force despite her size, and bested the most fearsome beasts and impossible obstacles across the Pacific Ocean while relying solely on her own intelligence. She is also very fun and so charming as a whole, and I really relate to that for what she provided and what I want to find in my own life like hers and the sea, to actually go out there for the better despite all odds. Where for all her strengths, Moana suffers from major identity crisis because she is surrounded by a loving family and supportive community of neighbors, where she does care a great deal for her own people and the village where she was born in and raised in. But however, she is also very passionate about her love for the ocean and the idea of voyaging beyond her home island's barrier reef. Throughout Moana's life, voyaging has always been prohibited as a means to keep the people of Motunui safe. But even so, Moana's spirited and tenacious attitude kept her dreams of experiencing life beyond the reef alive. At the same time, Moana was also happily devoted to her village during the time as chief in training. An intelligent and resourceful leader, Moana was also quick to remedy any problems her village faced and was masterful in keeping herself composed and optimistic during times of crisis. Her loyalty towards her family and people actually played a part in her crippling identity crisis. As she cared for them immensely, she also occasionally felt extreme guilt for being drawn to the sea, lamented in her song How Far I'll Go, believing that if she were to pursue the ocean, she would ultimately disappoint the people that she loved, simultaneously also feeling an obligation towards her ancestors, wanting to invigorate their ways of wayfinding as a means to honor them and the legacy they left for her people. Where it's how she kept going even when she clearly struggles throughout in various situations, including her own relationship with Maui, who overall grows and learns from her own way to help her properly navigate and sail. And through this, we learn that she is also empathetic and looks to help herself by helping and understanding others first. This is notably seen when she puts hours of work to focus on coming to understand Maui and the reasoning behind his own inner demons. In doing so, she was able to exhibit self-loving wisdom, specifically regarding to how one should look inside themselves for strength and guidance, and not someone else or what is on the outside. Moana would later use this to encourage herself during her own darkest hour, where as she grew throughout their adventure, she discovered more about herself, coming to realize that no one can actually define who you are other than yourself, and that is the most important part to take away. She was neither meant to be devoted solely to the sea or solely to her people, but to herself. As such, she was able to bring two loves together, ultimately recreating and honoring what came before her and the unity between her people and the sea, and how that overall entire experience is earned and justified to why the ocean specifically chose her, and seeing that when Te Fiti's face actually looks like hers overall, a reflection of who her character truly is and what she brings life to everyone and what makes her stand out as the best Disney hero ever created. It's about finding who you are and pushing through to achieve that despite what anyone else says about you and what you actually think that puts you down, and it's why I relate to her to that fact, and the fact that Auli'i is also Hawaiian too, so that's a plus why I should actually connect with that too. There was just no other way you could actually saw me end this if it weren't for that, and I really stand by that opinion to be the best of the best, no question, being the most fun and most compelling Disney protagonist ever created. And of course, this brings us to the end of my longest video to date, widely enough, but still enjoyable too, to discover characters I didn't think either like or hate as much as I did, and I hope you actually found that too in this very list. Because overall, Disney heroes remain to be the best and crucial parts of their stories, and I couldn't be more grateful for what each of them actually provided. And I know for certain they would continue to last past our own lifetimes for the foreseeable future into the unknown, and of course, great when they're actually added with villains too. With that all said, I'm all done, so goodbye.